Hey golfers, I'm Drew Mahowald, Second Swing Golf, back here on the YouTube channel. Apologies for those that have experienced the technical difficulties with us, but we are back with Chris Voshall here to talk about the Mizuno JPX 925 irons. We're very excited about them. Our fitters are also always excited about Mizuno irons, and so JPX 925 today is the pre-order day where you can go in for fittings and pre-order your sets at secondswing.com or pre-order in a store after a fitting. So we had to have Chris Voshall on today. Chris is with us on the busy pre-order day. Chris, thanks for taking the time with us to talk tech, to talk Mizuno, and to talk JPX irons.
I love it. This is always such a fun time because we're just really kind of unveiling everything that's new on the new JPX iron. So to be able to sit down and talk tech, talk fitting, talk all things new JPX, I couldn't be more excited. It's a busy day, but it's a busy in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those days where there's always something that kind of is, at least for us, right? There's always a little bit of the tech thing that kind of can throw things off a little bit, as we've already experienced. But now we're here and we're talking Mizuno irons. So I guess to dive right in, the story of JPX irons in the past, you kind of have touched on it before in other videos we've done, things like that. But a lot of players think about Mizuno irons. They think forged. They think that MP series from maybe whether the past or even now the present models. But the JPX lineup has been really made a surge in terms of kind of awareness for golfers the last few years. Technology, distance, ball speed. Dating back to JPX, what is it, 800 or 850, 900? So now we're all the way to 925.
800 was the start.
800. Okay, so you guys obviously made a ton of advancements since then. What's the about JPX 925? What is new and different here versus previous models?
I love talking about the JPX irons because it's really where we kind of start showing off our technologies. A lot of our material usage, our processes, a lot of the different things we do that eventually work their way to Mizuno Pro irons or whatever, they start in JPX. So with the hot metal family, this is something that the last couple generations you've seen really expand. When we first launched it with the JPX 900 hot metal, it was just one golf club, and then there was a hot metal, there was a JPX Forge and a JPX Tour. Next, you saw the hot metal Pro come into the line, and recently the hot metal HL started with the 923 family. And each of these things have kind of elevated the family a step further. They've actually kind of worked and been designed kind of in hand in hand working with fitters, making sure that we can deliver the technology for lots of different fitting capabilities within it. So what's so exciting about the 925 version of this is right now we've had an immensely successful 923 family. Honestly, it's the highest market share Mizuno's ever been. I think the fitters have really started to lean on them, but we've never pulled one lever that we felt like we could start pulling, and that's the multi-material lever. So what's exciting about 925 is it takes all those great things that 923 did, and by bringing in a multi-material, kind of takes it a step further. So the technology, the distance, the feel, the fitting capabilities, all those things are just enhanced to the next level with this new family.
Yeah, that's really cool because I know you guys have been working with unique materials already, and then now you bring in this kind of further, multi-material construction, and you've got, an iron obviously that brings in everything that's been all the best parts of Mizuno JPX irons of the past. And then I also wanted to bring up, as we dive into some of the tech stuff here, that Contour Ellipse face, which is something that I saw that and it intrigued me right away. So how did that come about, and what are golfers going to, I guess, see from that in the performance of their irons?
Yeah, the one of the big talking points is the Contour Ellipse face because it's a complete re-engineering and kind of rethinking of how we design our multi face thickness profile. In the past, it was a really thick portion in the middle just for durability reasons, and then it gets a little bit thinner as you go towards the perimeter. So the thinnest was always at the very far extremes, really honestly where nobody really hits the ball, like so far out. So what that meant is it was a golf club that was hot and it was durable, but the profile of how consistent the ball speed was all the way across the face wasn't as great as we thought we could execute. And that's where the Contour Ellipse face really comes in. Combining that with our nickel chromoly material, we were able to get thinner than we've ever done in an elliptical shape. This kind of tilted slightly from the low heel to the high toe. What that's going to deliver is this is going to deliver a ball speed in the center impact that's faster than we've ever been able to do before. And as it tapers down, when you go away from that, within the edges of that contour ellipse, it gets down to only 1.2 millimeters thickness, which is 30% thinner than we've ever been before on any face on anything. And that's because of the use of the nickel chromoly material. Because of the strength of that material, we're able to go so thin. And what that's going to mean to the player is when you get something a little bit off center, when you go towards the heel, towards the toe, you're going to get a really consistent ball speed as well. So it's not just hot on those center shots, it's hot all the way across the face.
Yeah, and ultimately those high ball speeds, that's certainly something golfers are demanding. And not that the JPX, 923, 921, 919, obviously those series also delivered tremendous ball speeds, but there's, something to be gained for sure by the Contour Ellipse face. And I was also curious too about the shape of that, because you mentioned, towards the heel and then up towards the high toe. It's kind of a different shape than, as you mentioned, maybe in the past it was kind of thin focused, on certain areas, thicker in the middle. Where did this shape come from? How did that design come up? Was it, based on research of, where golfers might be hitting the ball? Was it based on, obviously, you have a way bigger engineering and science background than I do, so maybe you can answer me on that side. But where did that kind of shape and design come from?
There's a lot of iterative testing that we do throughout, and a lot of it is on the player side, but then also from the engineering side with lots of simulations in the 3D world to simulate impact to see where we can get the biggest benefit in terms of ball speed consistency. So to start on the player side and on the fitter side, it is true that the majority of impacts from a player's, if you were to see the a profile or a scatter plot of where a player hits it, ideally you want it in the middle, but it tends to be low heel to high toe is really the impact pattern that typical players have. And from there, the actual shape of the iron, if you look at the shape of the iron, the heel is the lowest portion of that face and the toe is the highest portion of that face. So that happens to kind of coincide with where players hit. But that also means the center of, if you want to call it the center of percussion, like the middle of the hinge from the top line to the bottom line, isn't across this, isn't parallel to the ground. It's at that angle. So what that means is, a toe shot is going to need to be thinner in a different area than a heel shot is going to need to be to make sure you're getting consistent ball speed. So ultimately, it's all about where does a player hit it and how do we optimize the geometry of the face and what can we really do with that nickel chromoly material to make sure that the ball speeds are as consistent and hot as possible.
Right. Yeah, because it's fascinating. I'm sure you mentioned all the testing that you guys do. I suppose over time you realize these different tweaks that can make a big difference. And so I imagine that's kind of where the face came from, and maybe thinking a little outside the box of, well, we've done maybe this face structure, this face design in the past, but we have a better solution now after all this testing. So that's obviously really cool. And I know, again, in initial testing from our fitters, very excited about the ball speeds, not just off the center, but the off-center strikes as well. And I know we're talking about this category of iron that's very important. So talking about the other technology involved here, and a lot of this, I believe, is from past models as well. A lot of the same technologies are carried over, the ones that obviously are successful. It's kind of like if it's not broke, why would you try and fix it type of thing. So there's a new Contour Ellipse face. There's also some technologies that are successful from past models that are still in these. So let's kind of review those and let the golfers know what's still packed into the JPX irons.
Sure. And what I like to say is just because it's not broke, we still tweak everything a little bit just to optimize it a step further. So the first one I'll say is our seamless cut face design. That's something that it's kind of a fancy way of saying it's put together in one piece. We did not weld the face together. We did not weld the back on or anything like that. And where that becomes ultra important in a world of golf clubs that have lots of different pieces put together is that whenever you put two different materials together, then you have stresses and areas that are prone to breakage and areas that you almost have to play a little bit more conservatively on. So for example, if you were to weld a face onto a back piece, then I talked a minute ago about like the center of the hinge and the center of percussion, like the leading edge right in the middle where you have the largest span of displacement at impact, it's going to be an area that's prone to break. So if you can do that where there's not a hinge there, where you don't have a weld line that goes across that leading edge, then you're able to get more aggressive with it. You can go thinner, and you can also optimize the geometry to really engage more of the head on the impact. If it's multi-piece, then you really have to focus that impact to only be absorbed by the face piece to not
Sure.
disrupt that weld. So because we use our seamless cut face design, we have really thin geometry, 360 degrees around, which equals more of that head engaged in the impact. And ultimately, what that means is the trampoline plays larger. So it's like as soon as that trampoline gets larger, that center area rebounds even more, and those perimeters rebound even more. So that's one of the things that carries on. On top of that, our stability frame and kind of the shaping of the head itself, we really reinforce certain areas. For example, like under that leading edge, under that top line, where that becomes important is when you're going ultra thin on a face. There are so many clubs right now that are hot that feel not good. I'd say not like a Mizuno. Like we have a very
Right.
high level of expectation in terms of feel and performance. So when you get ultra thin, you have to make sure you're reinforcing a club to vibrate at the right frequencies. So we actually utilize a lot of our I'd say wood development strategies in terms of how we're reinforcing with sound ribs and sound bars and stuff like that to make sure that you're going to have a stable frame, but a stable frame that's going to feel good and actually help kind of balance that golf club. So that's where like our harmonic impact technology combined with our stability frame is going to deliver a club that has an ultra fast face. It's really stable, meaning the MOI and the toe heel and up down direction is really high, but also it feels great. Like it doesn't feel like you're losing out in terms of forgiveness or doesn't feel like you're losing out in terms of ball speed or just
Hmm.
solidness of impact.
Right. Yeah, and that all combines into deliver this iron that again in our initial testing we thought had made a great first impression. I'll say that. So now I
Mhm.
wanted to because we have some comments and questions already in the chat, just kind of questions about the difference between hot metal HL. So let's kind of go there and just start maybe differentiating the three models. So there's hot metal Pro, and there's hot metal HL. How are they different? How are they the same? And then I guess within that too, is there a target maybe golfer or golfers that I guess Mizuno was looking at with each model?
Yeah, I'd say between the three models, there are more similarities than there are differences. And what I mean by that is like the face geometry, the use of tungsten, the stability frame, the harmonic impact technology and the sound ribs, all that. That's completely shared across all three models between the
Okay.
Hot Metal Pro, and the Hot Metal High Launch. The three models are honestly, they're differentiated around fitting. And what I mean by that is the standard hot metal, just kind of that core model, is I'd say your broadest net. It's the biggest catch-all. We've seen players down to scratch playing it, but it tends to be a player in that I'd call it low single figures up to those kind of mid double digit, like teens in the handicap
Okay.
range. Typically, then the Hot Metal Pro is going to lean itself more towards a slightly better player. I say that not because it does anything less, but because the profile and the actual like specs of it are designed almost to suit the eye of a better player more. So the biggest difference on it, it's a thinner top line, it's a thinner sole, it's a little bit less offset, and a little bit shorter in the toe heel direction. Other than that, everything is the exact same. So it's like a spec change for the eye only, but
Sure.
the tech is identical. And then the Hot Metal High Launch is the really interesting one because it's the one that I'd say fitters will put it more into your hand than a player would tend to grab it or gravitate towards it. What I mean by that is because these golf clubs now have gotten so strong, and it's not just Mizuno golf clubs. I'd say, if anything, we're maybe the least guilty of strengthening lofts of anybody. But because clubs have gotten so strong, there is a large population of players who just simply don't hit them high enough.
Right.
Landing angle. And I saw in one of your videos earlier talking about landing angle, greater than 45 degrees. If you can get closer to 50 degrees, it's just better. Landing angle is stopping power. Landing angle is consistency of distance and all those things. So that's really where the Hot Metal High Launch originated from, is the tech of the face, the tech of the club itself is the exact same, but the specs are more designed to get the ball in the air. And what I mean by that is it's a weaker loft. The lofts, because loft is king. Like you can do so much with getting the ball to go fast, but if it doesn't go high enough and it doesn't have the proper amount of spin rate, then you're going to struggle to hold greens. You're going to struggle for consistency, particularly when you get into the longer irons. So ultimately, the difference between the three models, it's a spec difference. And with the way I would kind of differentiate them is if you're that player who wants that thinner, more kind of player's profile, take a look at the Hot Metal Pro. If you're that player who really just wants that ball to get in the air and struggles with height and struggles with stopping power, that's where the high launch comes in. Other than that, I think the Hot Metal is going to fit the majority of players.
Sure. Yeah. I think because it's cool that the irons are built similarly with, again, you mentioned how the tech, the materials, construction is all very similar, if not even the same across all three models. And so I do want to ask that as a follow-up, can golfers, if they would like, is a combo set possible here with these three models? Is that something that you would encourage? Because as we know, there are players that are, they're kind of picky about how their clubs look, right? Maybe they want their lower irons to be a little bit smaller, and then they want something larger in the longer irons. So, like, is that something that golfers can play with here?
It absolutely is. And what I'd say is the biggest thing you have to be careful of when you're comboing them is just understanding lofts and
Right.
understanding the gapping between clubs. So the Hot Metal and the Hot Metal Pro are the exact same loft. So, if you wanted to say, I want a little bit more compact scoring irons, I wanted to go Hot Metal Pro, 7 iron down, 7 to pitch, 7 to gap, and then combine that with a 6 iron, 5 iron, even a 4 iron of the Hot Metal, that works seamlessly because the specs are identical. When you're talking about the high launch, that's where you have to be a little bit more careful and pay a little bit more attention because they are on the weaker side. So, if you're
Right.
somebody who's playing the Hot Metal and you want something that's going to launch a little bit higher in the long irons, you actually may need to go a club stronger on the high launch than you would on just switching 4 iron for 4 iron. So you have to be a little bit careful there. But ultimately, with Mizuno, because we are so heavily invested in fitting, we want you to combo. We want you to get a set that suits your eye the best. We want you to work with a fitter and let the numbers dictate where I combo these sets.
Yeah, exactly. That's ultimately the goal of every combo set is just trying to make sure that the lofts match up and there's a purpose for every club in the bag, right? So, with that, I think I wanted to move down into the fly high. We can talk about the JPX 925 fly high a little bit, and kind of the technology there. A little bit of a new item here for golfers. What is the lowdown on that one?
The Fly High is a really interesting club because I'd say it's probably a little bit misunderstood in terms of what it is, because it looks like a hybrid, but it's designed a little bit more like an iron. What I mean is that it's designed to receive an iron shaft. So, like whatever you play in your 5 iron, 6 iron, 7 iron, whatever, we recommend that go straight into the Fly High as well. It's designed with that 355 shaft as opposed to the 370 for a hybrid. What that's going to do is that's going to give you a little bit more consistency when you're going from your irons to that next club, being the Fly High. But ultimately, the idea of it's not necessarily to go significantly longer than the previous club. It's designed to be the one that's going to help you maintain distance as your swing speed slows down, or as you start to see diminishing returns when you're getting into longer irons. So to me, it extends an iron set as opposed to bridging an iron set to a fairway would, which a traditional hybrid would do. So some of the tech behind it is it features our wave sole design that acts very similarly to how we did our stability frame and our seamless cup face on the Hot Metal irons, where it's going to help extend I'd say it's going to help make the trampoline play larger by encouraging more of that head to flex at impact. So you're going to get more consistent ball speeds and you're going to get a little bit higher launch. It's just going to make a club that's going to give you some of that distance that you typically might begin to lose if your club head speed is not on the higher end.
Right. Yeah, it's a tricky one for golfers because I think a lot of players aren't super confident in hybrids, or maybe they get kind of scared by maybe the extra distance that can be had and don't want to go. I always am scared of the long left miss of hybrids, right? And so, but
Yeah.
making sure if you have the launch capabilities and the stopping power, so to speak, that these fly high hybrids can produce, then it can work a lot better for your bag. Again, making sure the gapping and the launch is all, like I said, it has a purpose, right, in your bag, and it matches up the gapping there. So that
Well,
was, I mean,
and
again,
one thing I'd say,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say I love what you said there about, a lot of players are scared of hybrids and that left miss. And a
Yeah.
lot of that left miss comes from a couple of things. Comes from the fact that typical hybrids are on the longer side. And when that club gets so long, it tends to make a player come a little bit shallower and then go over the top and kind of, pull them. You see clubs on the hybrid side that are on the more upright side and they're long. Two things that's going to encourage a left miss. The JPX Fly High, because it's an extension of the iron set, it's not as upright, it's not as long. So it's designed to be hit more like an iron, meaning a little bit more with a descending blow as opposed to that, sweeping motion that a typical hybrid would. So even with that, because it's designed to be hit a little bit more like an iron, we actually put a what we call a speed bevel across the leading edge. So it actually put a little bit of bounce on it, like you would on an iron design. So ultimately, for those players that are scared of hybrids and really don't like them, this is actually a great option because it plays more like an iron. It just launches like a hybrid.
There we go. That's a great combo right there. I mean, I don't know what else you could want
Right.
in a hybrid, right? So, all right. I have a few questions from audience, from viewers that I wanted to get to here before we start to wrap up. Actually, I'm going to start with one that's actually from a Second Swing team member. So, this person plays Mizuno irons. They have a combo of the 241 and 243 irons, but they were curious about these models in particular. As you know, we've talked a little bit about driving irons or long irons in the bag. Whether it's Hot Metal Pro or Hot Metal, they're curious about the JPX 925 as, say, a 3 or 4 iron in the bag and how that might play with the 241s and 243s.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to start looking at a set of golf clubs because, too often players get stuck in one family and kind of what that family does and what that look does. We've seen a lot of our PGA Tour players start opting for Hot Metal Pro in the long irons, just for the very reason you were talking about. If you want something that is a little bit easier to hit, it's hotter. It is a little bit larger, but it's not designed to flow directly off of your next 6 iron or 7 iron. It's a club designed to be your longest one. So I think it's very common. I think it's a very smart thing to, on your longest club, even if you're a Mizuno Pro player, be open to a Hot Metal or a Hot Metal Pro, because I think it'll deliver a lot of the things that players are looking for, that they start to struggle with their long irons. This is a perfect club to put in. And again, we design everything to the same length, so it's not like you're going to have big length gaps or anything. It's just a stronger, hotter golf club. So I would absolutely encourage a player, particularly like a 241, 243 guy, look at your longest iron as a Hot Metal Pro, and I think you're really going to like it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought the answer would be, because it really, as it sets up, the Hot Metal Pro especially, it's a club I really like the look of, and it doesn't look too much, I guess, different from a dress. So it's still a pretty compact club. But compared to, your 243, for example, I don't think it's a super big transition appearance-wise between the two. So it could flow in there nicely, and I definitely, I can see why that would make a lot of sense. So I do have another one here, a good question that I'm actually curious for your answer on, too. So this is from Joe Lane. Says, what would the differences be between the Mizuno Pro 245 and then the Mizuno JPX 925 Hot Metal Pro? So again, it's trying to kind of place in as if there's I don't want to say category for the Hot Metal Pro model, but they have a similar build in the size, I think. So where do those two fit in with each other in terms of performance?
It's a great question because there's a lot of confusion in terms of what, especially in that what you call that player's distance category, kind of what clubs fall into what portion of that category. If it were me, and I know this is going to sound a little bit silly, but I'd say there's a player's distance category and there's a distance players category. One designed with a little bit more of a foot in the distance side and one with designed a little bit more with a foot in the, player side. And I'd say that the 245 is more that player's distance and the Hot Metal Pro would be that distance players. What I mean is that you are going to hit the 245 longer. Not the 245. You are going to hit the Hot Metal Pro. longer. It's designed, it is a little bit stronger loft because it is not a forged chromoly like we have on the 245. We are able to go thinner on that face. When you're forging the material, you have to play it a little bit more conservative because you can't get as extreme a geometry.
Sure.
So the 245 is going to go higher. The 245 is going to be not quite as hot. I will say the 245 is going to be a little bit more of I'd call it a traditional feel versus like a hottish feel that you might get out of the 925. So again, if you're looking for distance, the Hot Metal Pro is the way to go. If you're looking for a little bit more feel and control, I say the 245 is the way to go.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Then we do have one more here that I wanted to get to before we wrap up, and they're just asking for would there be a yardage difference or a spin rate difference between the high launch model and the regular hot metal model in testing? I know there's the different lofts there involved that are obviously going to play a big part of that. So should the golfers expect a difference there in those numbers?
It's a great question, and it's a very, very player dependent question. What I mean is, let's
Yeah.
just take an average of everything. If you look at our shaft optimizer data that we use to measure a lot of things, our average head speed is about 82 miles an hour. With that 82-mile-an-hour head speed, I would expect a distance difference between the hot metal high launch and the standard hot metal to be about 5 or 6 yards. However, if you're a player who is at all on the lower end of that side, so if you're at an 80-mile-an-hour 7-iron or 78-mile-an-hour 7-iron, we actually begin to see the hot metal high launch go further than the hot metal, particularly when you get into the longer irons. And I'd say the faster you are, the more distance difference you'd see with the hot metal going farther. The slower you are, you might actually see the high launch going farther. So that's why it's so critical to get with a fitter, get some numbers on things, and just understand what you're bringing to the table. Because, as much as I would love to say this one goes 5 yards further than that one, there are so many variables in that a fit, for you, there's a proper answer to that. And it all depends on what your head speed and what your swing DNA is.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great way to kind of start to wrap up, is because ultimately, that's the Mizuno JPX 925 irons are awesome. They're great, but they can be even better if they're optimized for your swing tendencies, what you're trying to accomplish. And so that's what our fitters are trying to do in the stores as of today on the pre-order day. So we'll start to wrap it up there. Again, schedule your fitting for Mizuno JPX 925 irons. We really appreciate Chris for taking the time on a busy day to join us and get us dialed in on these new irons. We're really excited about them. Our fitters are so amped to be fitting these finally. So, Chris, thank you once again for joining today. We appreciate it. Golfers, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for more Mizuno JPX 925 content. And one more time, Chris, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, and thanks for all y'all do at Second Swing. I mean, y'all do a fantastic job of fitting, and that's why. And I like to say, we come on here on our launch day, and the clubs aren't even on the rack, but we get you your fitting clubs first, because to me that's what's so important. So today, those fitting clubs should be available to go get dialed in, and no better place than to do it at Second Swing.
Love it. Thank you, Chris.